What if, the love of Milim and Rimuru? Milim started feeling strange whenever she was close to Rimuru. She understood that what she was feeling was love, but she had no idea how to act on it. Little did she know, Rimuru felt the exact same way about her. Will they be able to be together despite the many obstacles in their path? This is a Milim and Rimuru romance story with action to make the journey even more interesting. Written by Bengrem 1234. Chapter 18, Hinata's Resolve. Come in, Hinata said, assuming it was Rahim at the door. When the guards threw open the heavy doors, the exact man she expected stepped inside. It was Cardinal Nicholas, one of her few trusted friends, followed closely by a visibly shaken Archbishop Rahim. That much she had anticipated, but the group trailing in behind them completely caught her off guard. It looked like the 7 days clergy had actually decided to show up. Suddenly, their voices echoed directly inside Hinata's mind. Good to see you, Hinata. Are you doing okay? Why do you look so surprised? Hinata couldn't quite mask her shock. Why are all of you here? She asked out loud. Ser looked around, confused. Who are these guys, Hinata? Silence, Ser. Nicholas snapped hurriedly. You are standing in the presence of the 7 days. The room erupted as everyone shouted, what? It's true, Hinata admitted flatly. At that, every single knight in the room immediately snapped to attention and saluted, leaving Hinata as the only one remaining seated. According to the rumors, the 7 days clergy were legendary figures. They were elite masters who had completely surpassed the realm of the enlightened, tasked with training the next generation's hero. Their very existence was shrouded in mystery. They were the ones who put Hinata through the trials to determine humanity's next protector. But truth be told, Hinata despised them. She hated them with a burning passion because of how they ignored the Crusaders before she took over as leader. When she went through their trial, she realized they were nothing more than useless relics of a bygone era. She had even stolen their techniques using her unique skill, Usurper. That skill gave her 2 distinct powers, Seize, which let her strip a target of their abilities, and Copy, which allowed her to completely master those stolen skills for herself. By this point, she had completely surpassed the 7 days clergy in raw power, and they absolutely hated her for it. So, what brings you all here today? Hinata asked, her voice dripping with ice as she glared at them. The rest of the knights picked up on her blatant hostility and wisely chose to keep their mouths shut. The clergy's voices echoed back into her mind. He. There's no need to be alarmed. Archbishop Rahim has brought back some incredibly valuable information regarding the new demon lord, hasn't he? We simply want to hear what he has to say about this new threat for ourselves. They were relying entirely on thought communication to speak to her. Only 3 members of the 7 days clergy were actually present in the meeting, and they happened to be the most corrupt of the entire bunch. There was Ars, the Tuesday priest who manipulated fire, though his flames were nothing compared to Shizu's. Then there was Dina, the Monday priest, and Vina, the Friday priest. Hinata didn't trust a single one of them. From day one, these men had a personal grudge against her, taking every single opportunity to mess with her head and break her spirit. Things only got worse after she grew stronger than them. Now, they were actively plotting her demise by any means necessary. She hadn't completely figured out their ultimate motive yet, but she knew she would eventually. Deep down, Hinata was growing incredibly anxious. Rimuru already had a terrible impression of her. If the clergy started getting in the way and stirring up trouble, there was no telling what Rimuru might do to her and her people. Her only real hope was that once Rimuru realized Luminous was the true leader of their nation, it might be enough to get him to calm down. Turning her attention away from the priests, she looked at Rahim, signaling him to speak. Rahim's eyes were completely bloodshot. He was shivering like a terrified, lost puppy, and his voice cracked, sounding more like a desperate scream than an explanation. I and Falmouth were incredibly foolish. We challenged an enemy that was far too terrifying for any of us to handle. He will be the absolute downfall of any proud nation, and anyone who dares to cross him will meet the exact same horrific end we did. As his story unfolded, the paladins began whispering among themselves. The sheer scale of this monster's power was beyond anything they had ever heard of. Try as they might, they couldn't think of a single strategy to block the blinding flash of light Rahim kept describing. Hinata, however, kept her composure. She quickly analyzed the description and deduced that the attack probably relied on the mechanics of natural sunlight, using tiny water droplets to reflect and focus the beams at blinding speeds. It was undeniably lethal, but it could be countered as long as you knew how it worked. As if to validate her logic, the 7 days chimed in with their own telepathic commentary. Perhaps this is sunlight magic, similar to what Sir Gren was always so gifted at. Wouldn't a standard anti-magic barrier just shut it down entirely? True, and Gren spells never carried that much destructive force. Gren, the Sunday priest, was the leader of the clergy, and his specific magic allowed him to manipulate light. He had a spell that focused sunlight in almost the exact same way. Believing she had unlocked the mystery behind the power, Hinata wasn't all that worried anymore. But just as she began to think Rimuru might not be a big deal after all, Rahim spoke up again. "Please, just give me a moment," he said, swallowing hard as sweat poured down his face in pure terror. The unexpected light attack was dreadful, yes. But that wasn't the part that truly terrified me. The entire room fell completely dead silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing to hang on his next words. The real horror happened right after that. In an instant, the entire battlefield went completely quiet. Moments before, people were knocked out, mortally wounded, or screaming out in agony on the ground. Others were perfectly healthy but running around, completely losing their minds. And then, in a single blink of an eye, all of that noise just vanished. Hinata kept her voice steady. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "I mean exactly what I said, Lady Hinata." In that exact fraction of a second, every single surviving member of our 20,000-man army died. The only people left alive were Sir Raisin, King Edmaris of Farmus, and myself. Witnessing it, it completely broke my sanity, Rahim said, his face twisted in fear. A heavy silence swallowed the meeting room. This was a reality the knights couldn't even begin to comprehend. The stories reminded them of an ancient legend, a tale of a single being who could completely wipe out an entire nation to ascend as a demon lord. A creature like that was the definition of a walking calamity, possessing power far beyond human understanding. Wherever they walked, absolute destruction was sure to follow. Hinata's mind drifted back to a conversation she once had with Luminous regarding the hierarchy of the demon lords. In that memory, Luminous had warned her, saying there were two entities whose power she couldn't even fathom, Guy Crimson and Milim Nova. She explained that those two existed in a completely separate realm of power, one that might even surpass the true dragons themselves. When a younger, naive Hinata had asked who would win in a fight, Luminous told her that if she fought Milim, she might be able to outsmart her, but she could never actually win. As for Guy, she admitted there wouldn't even be a contest. She would simply die in the blink of an eye. Recalling that memory made Hinata visibly shudder. Perhaps if humanity banded together as one unified front, they might stand a chance against beings like that, but she knew that was nothing more than wishful thinking. The rest of the room finally started to grasp exactly what they were up against. This wasn't just some aspiring upstart, this was a fully awakened demon lord operating at the absolute peak of his power. And to make matters worse, he had the backing of the storm dragon, Veldora. The silence in the room grew suffocatingly heavy. No one wanted to be the first to admit that a true, literal demon lord had just been born. It seemed they had all completely brushed off the initial rumors of Rimuru's transformation. "I see," Hinata said, breaking the silence. "So we have to assume that Demon Lord Rimuru has fully awakened. But tell me, is it true that he has actually evolved into a true dragon?" The paladins leaned in closer. They had been debating this exact point right before Rahim arrived, and they desperately wanted a definitive answer. The moment Hinata asked the question, Rahim began to violently shake and hyperventilate. He started sweating blood, and actual tears of blood began streaming down his cheeks. The sight sent a wave of shock through everyone in the room. What on earth could he have witnessed to be this broken? What could the new demon lord have possibly done to him to leave him in such a pathetic state? It took several long minutes for Rahim to calm down enough to finally speak. Right before Demon Lord Rimuru let me go, he came to visit me in my cell. His appearance had completely changed. He looked slightly older and far more feminine, but it was his presence that was truly terrifying. The aura radiating off of him was unlike anything this world has ever experienced. He was accompanied by an incredibly high-ranking demon, but I couldn't even bring myself to look at the servant because Lord Rimuru's power was just too overwhelming. Compared to the day he slaughtered our army, his energy now felt completely limitless. I don't know what a normal demon lord is supposed to feel like, but Rimuru's power is catastrophic. That gave Hinata her answer. Based on Rahim's first-hand account, she could officially confirm that Demon Lord Rimuru had indeed evolved into a true dragon, just like Luminous had warned. The rest of the knights were left completely speechless. The arrogant confidence they held earlier dissolved into a distant memory. Faced with a reality like this, even the most hot-headed soldiers couldn't bring themselves to act tough. What did Demon Lord Rimuru say to you? Hinata pressed. Oh, right. He told me to deliver a message directly to you, Lady Hinata, Rahim said. He stepped forward and handed her a communication crystal. Hinata accepted it, staring down at the object with deep suspicion. She couldn't help but wonder what Rimuru wanted to say. Was it an official declaration of war? She was terrified of what she might see, but she knew she had no choice but to watch. The moment she activated the crystal, the projection revealed the figure of a goddess. No, that wasn't quite right. It was undeniably Demon Lord Rimuru, but his new form could only be described as completely divine. Hinata was stunned. The transformation was unbelievable. She could barely accept that this breathtaking deity on the screen was the exact same slime she had fought just a few months prior. How was a change like that even possible? As Rimuru's eyes locked onto the camera in the recording, Hinata felt a wave of panic wash over her, realizing just how deeply terrified she actually was. The other paladins in the room looked completely dumbfounded. Ser was the first to speak, his voice filled with shock. Is this beautiful deity honestly supposed to be the new demon lord? I can't get over how gorgeous he looks, Renaud muttered. Grigory shook his head. So that's Demon Lord Rimuru, huh? I have to admit, I was expecting a terrifying monster, not this beautiful girl. Wait a second, Fritz chimed in. Is Rimuru even a man? Glenda sighed, looking at the projection. I always pictured him as a guy, but looking at this, I'm really not sure anymore. I know what he looks like, Hinata interrupted firmly, but I can assure you all, he is 100% male. That statement instantly shut everyone up again. What are you even supposed to say when you find out the most beautiful being you've ever laid eyes on is actually a guy? The audio on the message finally kicked in, and the room went dead silent to listen. Hinata, are you there? I'm challenging you to a one-on-one duel. Just you and me, with absolutely no outside interference. That was the entire message. It was short, direct, and left zero room for interpretation. Everyone watching understood the underlying truth. Rimuru was furious about what Hinata had done to him. He had already eliminated Clayman, and now Hinata was next on his list. Nicholas looked over at her, his voice trembling. What should we do, Lady Hinata? Arnor stepped forward aggressively. Give the order, Lady Hinata. I will gladly lead an elite force to wipe this new demon lord off the map. Ser immediately rolled his eyes, turning on Arnor. Of course that's your brilliant idea. Do you even have a functioning brain inside that skull of yours? Arnor's face flashed with anger. What did you just say to me? Hinata literally just spent the last half hour telling us to keep our hands off, Ser shot back. Do you honestly think the other demon lords are just going to sit back and watch if we launch an attack on one of their own? And that's assuming we could even land a scratch on him in the first place. Arnor sneered. What's the matter, Sir? Are you getting cold feet? Not at all, Sir replied calmly. But if what Rahim said is true, and this new demon lord really has ascended into a true dragon, then our only logical move is to accept his terms and face him alone. Lytus nodded in agreement. He's right, Arnor. We aren't just dealing with demon lord Rimuru here, we also have to worry about the storm dragon Veldora. We might stand a fraction of a chance if we pooled all our strength against one of them, but fighting both at the same time is just a suicide mission. Meanwhile, Hinata silently weighed her choices. Arnor wanted a massive, all-out war with Rimuru. But if they went down that path, it would inevitably drag other nations into the conflict, which would spell disaster for their people. And that was assuming Rimuru didn't just slaughter their entire army on day one. On the other hand, she could choose to accept his offer, settling the dispute strictly between the two of them without dragging anyone else into the crossfire. Since this entire mess was a direct result of her own rash judgment, it was her responsibility to see it through to the end. In a way, she felt incredibly lucky that she hadn't blindly invaded Rimuru's territory without understanding the full scope of the situation. Against a true dragon, numbers meant absolutely nothing. Still, something felt incredibly off about this situation. Did Rimuru's evolution completely strip away his humanity? Did he genuinely want her dead? And why on earth were the 7 Days clergy tagging along with Rahim while remaining completely silent the entire time? She was starting to suspect there was a hidden agenda at play, but she didn't have any concrete proof to back up her gut feeling. The only way to find out was to actually go and meet Rimuru face to face. She believed the truth would reveal itself once they were standing across from each other. Standing up, she looked out over the gathered knights. I am going to meet Demon Lord Rimuru just as he requested. However, I am not going there to fight him. I am going to apologize for my past actions. The voices of the 7 Days suddenly echoed in her mind once more. If that is your final decision, so be it. May the divine grace of Luminous keep you safe. The Demon Lord Rimuru is an absolute threat. But we believe you possess the power to surpass him. Here, take this. It is a weapon known as the Dragon Buster. Consider it extra protection, just in case things go sideways. With those words, they presented Hinata with a brand new sword. She stared at the blade, completely dumbfounded. She had just openly stated that she had no intention of fighting Rimuru, yet here they were, practically forcing a specialized weapon into her hands to provoke a battle. This gesture made her incredibly suspicious of their true intentions. Regardless, she accepted the weapon and offered a polite word of thanks. Without another word, the 3 members of the 7 Days clergy slipped out of the room. The paladins immediately stepped forward, trying to protest. My lady, please? But Hinata raised a hand, silencing them instantly. You all have your assignments. This joint session is officially adjourned. The paladins stood, bowing deeply before making their exit. They clearly had their reservations, but they would never dream of disobeying a direct order from their captain. Once the room was completely empty, Hinata looked up at the ceiling and let out a heavy, exhausted sigh. I wonder if my time is finally running out. Well, whatever happens next, I will make absolutely sure that Rimuru's wrath ends with my life. With that final vow, she turned and walked out of the room. Chapter 19, Rimuru's Skills Upgrade. Meanwhile, back in the nation of Tempest, a full month had already flown by, and Rimuru had been incredibly busy. He spent the last 4 weeks meticulously organizing his country and establishing peaceful diplomatic ties with various human nations. The rumors surrounding his massive evolution had spread across the land like wildfire, but thankfully, no one outside his inner circle had any concrete evidence to prove it. To keep things under wraps, Rimuru strictly ordered his people never to speak of his ascension to anyone who wasn't a legal citizen of Tempest. During his downtime over the past month, Rimuru had been spending a lot of quality time with Milim. She had a habit of constantly sneaking out of her own country just to visit him. He frequently took her on exciting trips, showing her around different human cities as well as the local spots in Tempest. On one occasion, he even brought her along to the armed nation of Dworgen, where the two of them had a fantastic time together on what felt like a fun playdate. However, when King Gazelle found out about the cozy relationship between Rimuru and Milim, he nearly had a total heart attack, purely from anticipating the massive political headaches and stress that would inevitably follow if the general public ever found out. Milim was on cloud 9 getting to spend so much time with her beloved Rimuru, and Rimuru made sure to give her all the care and attention she could ever ask for. Every now and then, Fry would show up to drag Milim kicking and screaming back to her own realm to actually do her job and run her country. Thanks to the incredibly close bond between their two leaders, the Jura Tempest Federation and the City of the Forgotten Dragon shared an alliance tighter than almost any other nations in the world. Rimuru's affection for Milim kept growing every single day, and Milim felt the exact same way. They reached a point where they couldn't stand going a single day without seeing each other, whether that meant jumping onto a video call or traveling across borders for an impromptu visit. Right now, Rimuru was sitting at his desk, mentally reviewing everything that had gone down with Clayman's army. After the dust had settled, Benimaru and the rest of the commanders returned to Tempest to give him a full report. Rimuru had actually used his thought acceleration ability to directly view Benimaru's memories of the battle. To say he was shocked by his army's growth would be a massive understatement. His forces had completely and utterly demolished Clayman's troops. Benimaru had easily solidified his spot as one of the strongest subordinates in the nation, right behind Diablo, and his raw magical energy was still actively climbing even now. Rimuru couldn't help but wonder how that was even possible. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind. It was Sile. I may have done a little bit of remodeling on his skills. Rimuru blinked. Wait, what? What exactly have you been doing to my subordinate's abilities without telling me? When did you even find the time to perform an upgrade like that? Sile answered smoothly. The moment you successfully evolved into a true dragon, I took the liberty of optimizing every single individual who shares a soul connection with you. I integrated their redundant traits and gifted them the exact abilities that would perfectly complement their combat styles. Wow, Rimuru thought. I definitely wasn't expecting that. Is that why everyone suddenly became so ridiculously overpowered? Yes, Master. Well, that certainly explains it, Rimuru mused. The way they handled that entire army was mind-blowing. For instance, Geld managed to fight off those two members of the moderate Harlequin alliance entirely on his own. One of them, the guy named Footman, easily possessed the raw strength of a demon lord, yet Geld made the entire fight look like a walk in the park. Sue had reached an entirely new level of power as well. He now had the ability to literally transform into a living shadow, utilizing that trait in a dozen terrifying ways during combat. But the biggest surprise of all had to be Gabiru. Looking through the memories, Gabiru had gone toe-to-toe with Midray all by himself. Sufia hadn't been able to land a solid hit on the guy, yet Gabiru fought him as an absolute equal. It turned out he now possessed a high-tier skill that let him completely rewrite his own fate whenever he found himself in a desperate situation, though the catch was he could only use it once a day, almost like an Izanagi ability. Even with that daily limitation, it was an incredibly frightening power to possess. Then, a sudden thought struck Rimuru. Wait a minute. Sile, did you upgrade my own skills too? The mind link went completely silent. What's with the sudden quiet? Sile, seriously, what did you do to my body? I may have completely overhauled your entire skill set without asking for your permission, Master. Rimuru realized he honestly shouldn't be surprised at this point. Tampering with abilities was basically her favorite hobby. And knowing her, when she said she overhauled something, it meant she had cooked up an entirely broken, overpowered system. She never did anything by halves, which was exactly why he relied on her so much. Sile's voice sounded almost proud. My beloved Master Rimuru deserves to be the absolute strongest being in existence. I successfully stripped away all of your redundant abilities and compressed your core skills into their ultimate forms. As you stand right now, there is no question that you are the most powerful entity in this world. Well, I can't really argue with that logic since she did it all for my benefit, Rimuru thought. I guess I better take a look at my status sheet just to see what I'm actually working with now. Sile, go ahead and run an appraisal on me. Let's see how strong I am, and see how I stack up against Milim. Understood, Master. Generating the appraisal results now. Rimuru Tempest Status Profile. Name, Rimuru Tempest. Existence value, over 289 million. This value increases by an additional 5.74 million when equipping the Dragon Blade, and features a completely unquantifiable bonus from the Magic Breeder Reactor. Race, highest tier Divine Spirit, known as the Ultimate Slime. Divine Protection, Rimuru's Compassion. Title, The Devourer. Magic types, Stardust Magic, True Dragon Magic, Spirit Summoning, Demon Summoning, and various advanced mystic arts. Mana's Core, Sile. Unique abilities, Universal Perception, Dragon Spirit's Haki, Universal Shapeshift. Ultimate skills, Void God Azathoth, Harvest Lord Shub-Niggurath, and Lord of Fate. Resistances, total invalidation to physical attacks, natural elements, status ailments, and spiritual damage, alongside an incredibly high resistance to divine attacks. Rimuru stared at the mental projection, completely floored. His raw existence value was absolutely astronomical. When he factored in his magic sword, the numbers became almost hilarious. Hey Sile, what's up with the question marks next to the Magic Breeder Reactor? Because you possess a fully functional Magic Breeder Reactor, you gain access to a completely infinite supply of Magicules the moment it is turned on. Because that power is literally bottomless, it cannot be calculated using standard numerical measurements. Unbelievable, Rimuru thought. So the reactor basically gives me infinite mana on demand. Honestly, with the absurd amount of energy I already have flowing through me, I doubt I'll ever even need to turn the thing on. But hey, it's always good to have a massive trump card hidden away just in case. Looking closely at his profile, he noticed something else. Hold on, I only have 3 ultimate skills left down there? How did you manage that? As I mentioned, I systematically integrated all of your secondary and redundant skills, fusing them together to manifest these 3 ultimate paths. Rimuru could only muster a deadpan mental expression. A part of him wanted to complain about her doing major soul surgery without asking first, but after reading through what these 3 new skills could actually do, he decided to keep his mouth shut and count his blessings. First up was Void God Azathoth, and its sub-abilities were absolutely terrifying. It included Soul Consumption, Nihility Collapse, Imaginary Space, True Dragon Release for both the Scorching and Storm attributes, Time and Space Manipulation, and a multi-dimensional barrier. The individual components were completely broken. Soul Consumption was a drastically upgraded version of Beelzebub, allowing Rimuru to completely swallow an enemy alongside their entire soul. Nihility Collapse, also known as Turn Null, tapped into the primordial, chaotic destructive energy of the void, which Sile kept safely controlled and manageable for him. Imaginary Space was the absolute evolution of his old stomach and isolation skills, acting as a chaotic, infinite pocket dimension designed to permanently quarantine anything or anyone he locked away. Time and Space Manipulation gave him total mastery over the fabric of reality, letting him teleport anywhere instantly just by thinking about it. It even allowed him to manipulate time itself, giving him the power to trap an enemy inside a permanent time loop where they would repeat the exact same moment forever. Multi-dimensional barrier was a permanently active, flawless defense shield generated by overlapping sub-dimensional faults, making him practically untouchable. The second core skill was Harvest Lord Shub-Niggurath, which controlled skill creation, skill duplication, skill gifting, and the skill bank. This was yet another incredibly broken asset. Skill creation quite literally allowed Rimuru to invent any new ability he could think of from scratch. Skill duplication let him instantly copy any ability he witnessed. Even better, it allowed him to bypass the natural laws of the world. Normally, only one version of an ultimate skill could exist in the world at a time, but this allowed Rimuru to manufacture multiple exact duplicates whenever he wanted. Skill gifting allowed him to bestow abilities upon his subordinates. Combined with duplication, he could hand out copies of high-tier skills to his followers while keeping the original perfectly intact for himself. Skill Bank acted as an infinite storage vault where he could keep an endless library of abilities safe and sound. Finally, there was his third and most powerful asset, the ultimate skill Lord of Fate. This specific power granted him fate manipulation, fate rewrite, mind manipulation, and complete reality bending. Breaking down those powers revealed an entirely new echelon of godhood. Fate manipulation gave him the ability to alter the destiny of any target however he saw fit. Fate rewrite allowed him to completely change the timeline to favor whatever outcome he envisioned. For example, if a future existed where Rimuru was supposed to die, he could simply rewrite reality to ensure he survived. Or if he ran into an opponent who was drastically stronger than him, he could rewrite fate to instantly make himself more powerful than his enemy. Mind manipulation allowed him to effortlessly brainwash a target or completely rewrite their memories from scratch, though it wouldn't work on anyone who possessed total mental attack immunity. Reality bending was the ultimate power. It gave him the ability to rewrite the laws of nature itself. If he wanted to, he could make it so that all human beings possessed infinite lives, or make natural water taste exactly like sweet honey. He could plunge a planet into eternal night, or alter the biology of a species so that males were the ones who gave birth instead of females. Whatever he imagined, he could instantly turn into reality. This skill essentially granted him absolute, unquestionable authority over existence itself. By the time Sile finished walking him through his new catalogue of powers, Rimuru was completely speechless. If he hadn't been in his own body, he would have been screaming in panic. How on earth did he become this ridiculously strong? It was almost funny. He could rewrite destiny and bend the fabric of reality to his whim. Even though true dragons are incredibly powerful, they aren't completely immortal in the sense that they can't be defeated in battle. If he faced someone strong enough, he could technically be killed, and even though he would eventually reincarnate later down the line, he would still die in that moment. But now, with the Lord of Fate skill at his disposal, he could simply rewrite history to ensure a lethal blow never landed, making him truly immortal. The only real catch was that these reality warping abilities required an absolutely massive amount of magicules to activate. If he had tried using these back when he was a standard demon lord, he would have instantly drained himself dry and failed. But now, thanks to his evolution into a true dragon and the addition of the magic breeder reactor, he had an infinite pool of energy to fuel these godlike powers whenever he pleased. With his current loadout, absolutely no one in existence could match him in an actual fight, because the moment things looked bad, he could simply alter the narrative of the universe to guarantee his victory. It was no wonder Sile was so incredibly confident when she declared him the most powerful being alive. "Hey Sile," Rimuru asked curiously, "what happened to my older sub-skills? You know, things like future sight, thought acceleration, and all the others." Every single one of those secondary systems, including thought acceleration, future sight, analysis, appraisal, parallel operation, integration, separation, chant nullification, all of creation, food chain, and law domination, have been completely absorbed directly into my own core processing matrix. This allows me to execute them on your behalf at a significantly faster rate than ever before. Rimuru smiled internally. "I don't even know what to say except thank you, Sile. You really outdid yourself this time." "I will gladly do anything for the sake of my beloved master," she replied, her tone sounding incredibly happy. "Now that I have a clear understanding of my own powers, let's see how I compare to Milim," Rimuru thought. He had actually managed to run a sneaky appraisal on Milim while they were taking a nap together a while back. He had been dying to know just how massive her power reserves truly were, and Sile had been more than happy to gather the data. Milim Nova Status Profile. Name: Milim Nova. Existence value: over 120 million. This number climbs by an additional 10.56 million when she equips her world-class sword, Tenma, and her world-class armor, alongside her own unquantifiable bonus from a magic breeder reactor. Race: highest tier divine spirit, specifically a dragonoid. Divine blessing: Milim's Rage. Title: The Destroyer. Magic types: Stardust magic, elemental magic, and space magic. Unique abilities: Universal Perception, Demon Lord Enhanced Haki, Thought Acceleration, Thought Manipulation, Gravity Control, the Draconic Milim Eye, the Milim Ear, Infinite Regeneration, and her own version of Analyze and Assess. Extra skill: Spatial Motion. Ultimate skill: Armageddon Destruction. Resistances: Total invalidation to physical attacks, natural elements, status ailments, and spiritual damage, paired with an incredibly high resistance to divine attacks. Her specific ultimate skill, Armageddon Destruction, granted her a terrifying arsenal: Drago Nova, Drago Buster, Hakai, Time and Space Manipulation, and a multi-dimensional barrier. Dragon Nova allowed her to unleash an incredibly compressed beam of pure stardust energy, resulting in a cataclysmic blast radius depending on how many magicules she pumped into the attack. Drago Buster let her fire a barrage of destructive light beams capable of completely vaporizing an entire continent if she chose to unleash its full power. Hakai was a terrifying existence erasure ability. It gave her the power to literally delete a target out of reality entirely, targeting their skills, their soul, or even the surrounding space itself. The only limitation was that it couldn't instantly erase someone who possessed an equal or greater power level than her. Time and Space Manipulation gave her the ability to cross dimensions and travel instantly, completely ignoring the linear flow of time. Multi-dimensional barrier kept a flawless, permanent protective shield around her body at all times. Looking over her sheet, Rimuru had to admit her stats were absolutely terrifying. When she geared up with her world-class weapon and armor, her power level spiked even higher. She easily rivaled him in pure existence value, and just like him, she possessed a magic breeder reactor that granted her a limitless supply of energy. Her ultimate skill was the definition of an apocalyptic threat, completely focused on maximum, wide-scale annihilation, which perfectly explained why the world gave her the title of the Destroyer. To be completely honest, if Rimuru was still operating at his old Demon Lord level, he wouldn't have stood a single chance against her in a real fight. Her raw power made the other Demon Lords look like total amateurs. Luckily, with his current True Dragon upgrades, he felt entirely confident that he could take her down if it ever came to blows. Though, he obviously had absolutely zero intention of ever fighting Milim. Shifting his focus away from the status menus, Rimuru glanced over at the clock on his wall and realized it was already 6 o'clock in the evening. He had an official date scheduled with Milim at 7, and he had absolutely no intention of keeping her waiting. Besides, he had a very important question he wanted to ask her once the date was over. Right on cue, a polite knock echoed from his office door. "Come on in," he called out. The door slid open, and Shuna stepped inside with a warm, bright smile. "Lord Rimuru, it is time to start getting ready for your big evening with Lady Milim." "Ah, right. Thank you for the reminder, Shuna," Rimuru said, stretching his arms. "By the way, how are things looking out in the city?" "Everyone is working incredibly hard," Shuna replied cheerfully. "The special surprise you requested for Lady Milim is officially complete. I am entirely confident that she is going to absolutely love it." Rimuru smiled warmly, reaching into his desk drawer to pull out a small object. He looked down at it, a nervous grin tugging at his lips. "Man, I really hope this goes well." Shuna's smile softened encouragingly. "I know it will, my lord." Suddenly, the door flew open as Shun barged into the room, holding up a garment bag with absolute pride. "Lord Rimuru, I have officially tracked down the absolute perfect outfit for your big date tonight." A look of pure dread instantly washed over Rimuru's face. But as he looked at the massive, glowing smile on Shun's face, he realized he didn't have the heart to reject her. Accepting his fate, he sighed and allowed himself to be playfully dragged out of the office by Shuna and Shun. One thing was absolutely for certain, it was going to be a very, very long evening. Chapter 20, Proposal. Deep inside the royal living quarters, a minor crisis was underway. Rimuru was currently stuck surviving what can only be described as intense dress-up therapy, courtesy of Shun and Shuna. He was incredibly excited for his big date with Milim, but his two top subordinates were essentially treating him like their personal fashion doll, and the non-stop outfit changes were definitely starting to test his patience. "Lord Rimuru, you simply must try this one on." Shun beamed, aggressively holding up a vibrant outfit she had picked from the racks. He obligingly put it on, only for Shuna to immediately shake her head. No, Shun. That color doesn't suit the mood at all. Lord Rimuru, you should definitely try this one instead. She handed him a beautifully woven piece of fabric, leaving him with absolutely no choice but to change all over again. Finally growing completely tired of playing the part of a mannequin, Rimuru sighed and threw his hands up. Come on, girls, give me a break here. Can't you find something that actually matches the traditional evening festival we're throwing tonight? At that exact comment, a light bulb practically flickered to life over both of their heads. Shuna and Shun traded a quick, knowing look, gave a synchronized nod, and went tearing back into the depths of the walk-in closet. A moment later, they returned with a brand new ceremonial outfit and practically forced him into it. The moment Rimuru stepped out from behind the changing screen, both of his attendants literally had stars in their eyes. Oh, my lord, you look absolutely breathtaking. Shun gasped, a tiny bit of literal drool threatening to escape the corner of her mouth. Shuna folded her hands together, smiling warmly. I expected nothing less from you, Lord Rimuru. It is absolute perfection. Rimuru shifted uncomfortably on his feet, his cheeks flushing a faint pink. You guys really think it looks that good? Are you kidding? You look just like a literal goddess in that outfit. Shun shouted at the top of her lungs. Rimuru could only muster a completely deadpan expression in his own mind. I am still a guy, though, he reminded himself. Just then, the door slid open and Diablo stepped into the dressing room. The second his eyes landed on Rimuru wearing the new festival yukata, a deeply intense, almost fanatical look of pure adoration washed over his face. He looked like he had just witnessed a divine miracle firsthand. I am truly not worthy to even stand in your magnificent presence, Lord Rimuru, Diablo declared, dropping into an incredibly theatrical, low bow. Shun smirked, crossing her arms and looking immensely pleased with herself. Humph! It's about time you recognized Lord Rimuru's absolute greatness, Second Secretary. Aha, fundamental truths do not require validation, Shun, Diablo replied smoothly, adjusting his posture. Of course I know how magnificent Lord Rimuru is. His very existence is so profoundly divine that the entire world should be spending every waking moment worshipping him. Well, I'm glad you're finally starting to see things my way, Diablo, Shun said, walking over to him. In a shocking twist of events, the two of them actually shook hands, sharing a rare, unified smile of pure pride. Watching the bizarre display, Rimuru felt a sudden wave of genuine concern wash over him. Wow, those two really do get along whenever they're busy exaggerating my existence. But seriously, what kind of ridiculous schemes are they whispering about right in front of my face? I need to keep a very close eye on those two after tonight. There is no telling what kind of absolute chaos they'll unleash if they're left unsupervised for more than 5 minutes. By the way, Diablo, what actually brought you in here? Rimuru asked, deliberately breaking up the Mutual Admiration Society. Diablo snapped right back to reality and gave a respectful bow. Ah, forgive my forgetfulness, Lord Rimuru. It is officially time for you to head down to the square to meet Lady Milim. Rimuru blinked, glancing out the window. Wait, is it 7 o'clock already? Not quite, sir, but it seems Lady Milim managed to arrive a bit early, Diablo explained. I see. Well, I'm finally done playing dress up, so let's go meet her, Rimuru said, brushing off his sleeves and walking toward the exit. Right before he stepped through the door, he looked back over his shoulder. Oh, right. The rest of you are completely free to enjoy the evening festival as you see fit, but please, do not forget about the special arrangements we talked about. We absolutely won't forget, my lord, they promised in perfect unison. Rimuru gave them a satisfied nod and departed. The absolute second the door clicked shut behind him, Sue and Benimaru materialized directly inside the room using spatial shift. They traded quick, serious nods with Shun, Shuna, and Diablo before immediately heading out into the shadows of the city to execute their secret mission. Meanwhile, Rimuru made his way down to a quiet, scenic corner of the capital where a beautiful small pond rested away from the main crowds. When he arrived, he caught sight of something that completely stopped him in his tracks. His breath caught in his throat. Milim was standing right there by the water's edge, wearing the most stunning festival yukata he had ever seen in his entire life. She was looking down at her own reflection in the ripples, nervously adjusting her hair to make sure it looked okay. "Milim!" Rimuru called out softly. She jumped slightly, completely startled out of her own thoughts. But the second she turned around and saw Rimuru standing there, she froze, a massive, brilliant blush instantly spreading across her cheeks. "Rimuru, wow! You look so incredibly beautiful. And handsome. You look amazing." Rimuru blushed just as hard, a warm smile breaking across his face. Stepping forward, he closed the distance between them and gently placed both of his hands on her waist. "You're the one who is absolutely gorgeous, Milim. You literally just took my breath away." Milim's face turned completely red. Neither of them said another word for a long, quiet moment, perfectly content to just stand there by the water, completely lost in each other's eyes. Eventually, Rimuru gently slipped his hands back from her waist and elegantly offered his open palm. "Shall we go?" Milim, currently far too flustered to trust her own voice, simply took his hand. Her cheeks were still burning with a cute, bright blush. Rimuru led her through the vibrant streets over to a lovely cafe that specialized in gourmet cakes and rare sweets. The second they stepped inside, Milim's eyes practically turned into dinner plates at the massive array of colorful treats on display. The gobbly clerk running the counter immediately recognized them and bowed so low her forehead almost touched the wood. "It is an absolute honor to welcome you to my shop, Lord Rimuru and Lady Milim. How may I serve you both this fine evening?" "I have a VIP reservation for tonight," Rimuru explained, keeping his fingers tightly locked with Milim's. By this point in time, it was a completely open secret throughout the entire nation of Tempest that Rimuru and Milim were in a serious, committed relationship. Every single monster in the country knew about it. And while human travelers and merchants had certainly heard the wild rumors floating around, none of them had ever been able to confirm the gossip firsthand. To the outside human world, it was still considered nothing more than a myth. "Right this way, please," the clerk said, quickly guiding them over to a beautifully decorated table featuring a prominent VIP reservation tag. Wanting to act like a true gentleman, Rimuru stepped ahead and pulled out Milim's seat for her. Milim blushed softly, sliding into the chair. "You really don't have to do all this formality for me, you know." "Nonsense," Rimuru replied with a playful wink. "My queen deserves the absolute best treatment I can possibly offer." Milim let out a soft, happy sigh, her cheeks still deeply flushed. Rimuru walked around, took his own seat across from her, and picked up the menu, which was absolutely packed with dozens of mouth-watering desserts. A waiter dressed in a sharp, crisp butler uniform stepped up to the edge of their table. "Good evening, Lord Rimuru and Lady Milim. Are you two ready to place your order?" Rimuru looked up and smiled, taking note of the waiter's human appearance. "It really is incredible to see how many humans are migrating to Tempest ever since I officially declared myself a demon lord. They're clearly looking for safety and stability, and it's just so nice to see them coexisting and working alongside monsters so naturally." "Yes, please. I would like the strawberry cake with the fresh milk cream on top," Rimuru ordered smoothly. The waiter took down the note and turned a polite gaze toward Milim. "And for you, my lady." Milim was completely paralyzed by indecision. Absolutely everything on the menu looked incredibly delicious, and she was staring at the pages like she was trying to solve a complex math formula. She had absolutely no idea what to choose. Recognizing the exact look of panic on her face, Rimuru stepped in to save the day. He looked up at the waiter and said, "Why don't you bring her the specialty honey cake with melted cheese? That's the house favorite, right?" "An excellent choice, sir. Your orders will be ready in just a few moments," the waiter said, bowing deeply before slipping away toward the kitchen. Milim looked across the table at Rimuru, giving him a deeply grateful smile. "Thanks for the save, Rimuru. I'm really sorry, I just couldn't make up my mind with so many choices. Rimuru reached out across the table and gently took her hand into his. Hey, don't worry about it for a second. Tonight, I want you to leave absolutely everything to me. Just relax, and let me pamper you a little bit. Milim's blush returned full force, practically radiating heat. You always know exactly how to make me feel completely embarrassed and incredibly happy at the same time. Hey, I'm just being completely honest, Rimuru said, his smile softening. Their desserts arrived shortly after, and the two of them had a wonderful time sharing their cakes and getting lost in a light-hearted, happy conversation. Once they finished eating, they left the cafe and walked deeper into the heart of the bustling festival grounds. Rimuru eventually led Milim over to a classic shooting gallery game, where players could win prizes by successfully knocking down a line of targets. Welcome to my stand, Lord Rimuru and Lady Milim. I hope the two of you are having a spectacular date on this fine evening, the shop owner said with a wide, welcoming grin. Naturally, the direct comment made both of them blush up a storm. Luckily, Rimuru managed to regain his composure a lot faster than Milim did. Yes, we're having a great time, thank you. We'd love to try out the shooting game. How much is it to play? Please, Lord Rimuru, it is entirely on the house. Now, which one of you would like to step up first? The owner asked generously. Milim quickly snapped back to reality, taking a confident step forward with a loud, boisterous laugh. Mwahaha! I guess it's my time to shine. I am definitely going first. The owner handed her the toy rifle. Just knock down the targets on the rack, and you can choose any prize you want from the back wall. Milim leaned all the way over the counter, focusing every bit of her attention on her aim. She concentrated deeply on the targets, looking incredibly fierce and locked in, while a completely flustered Rimuru stood right beside her, doing his absolute best to politely stare at the ceiling to give her some space. Completely unaware of how much she was making Rimuru blush, Milim fired a perfect sequence of shots, cleanly knocking down every single target on the board. She jumped straight into the air with pure joy, turning around and throwing her arms around Rimuru in a massive, ecstatic hug. Seeing her looking so incredibly happy, Rimuru forgot all about his awkwardness and happily wrapped his arms around her, hugging her back tightly. The store owner smiled warmly at the scene. A perfect score. So, what prize catches your eye, my lady? Milim let go of Rimuru and pointed excitedly toward the top shelf. That one right there. The one next to the dragon. The owner reached up, grabbed the toy, and handed it over. It was a custom-made plush doll of Rimuru in his adorable, round blue slime form. Milim immediately snuggled it right against her chest, looking absolutely over the moon. Rimuru smiled, reaching down to take her hand once more. Come on, let's keep moving. We still have plenty of things to see tonight. The next couple of hours flew by in a blur as they explored the rest of the festival together, visiting different stalls and trying out all kinds of local games. Milim had a brilliant, radiant smile on her face the entire night, completely fascinated by all the new experiences. And seeing her enjoy herself so thoroughly made Rimuru immensely happy. But like all good things, the festival eventually began to wind down as midnight approached. Rimuru walked side by side with Milim back toward the absolute center of the city. As they entered the main square, they came across a massive, towering structure that was completely covered by a heavy brown cloth. The surrounding streetlights had all been turned off, leaving the soft, silver glow of the full moon as their only source of light. Rimuru stopped walking, turning around to face Milim directly. He reached out and took both of her hands into his own. Milim blushed deeply, looking straight into his eyes. In that moment, she could see a heavy mixture of intense nervousness and fierce, unshakable determination reflecting back at her. The sheer level of his anxiety made her feel a little bit confused, and a small wave of worry washed over her. Is something wrong, Rimuru? She asked softly, tilting her head. Rimuru closed his eyes, taking a deep, steadying breath to calm his racing heart before looking back at her. Milim, did you truly have fun tonight? Of course I did. Absolutely everything you showed me was incredible. But the absolute best part of it all was getting to experience it alongside you, Milim said, her voice dropping to a gentle, heartfelt tone. Rimuru smiled, his cheeks flushing a bright crimson. Well, in that case, I have one final thing I want to show you. What is it? Milim asked, her eyes lighting up with curiosity. Rimuru secretly gave the telepathic signal to Benimaru and the others, who were all quietly waiting in their hidden positions around the square. He had spent days coordinating this specific surprise, and everyone had been working tirelessly behind the scenes to set it up flawlessly. Now, it was finally time to unveil it. The surprise began with Gabiru instantly flipping the main switch, illuminating the entire square with brilliant, dazzling lights. Right on cue, Shun and Shuna used their magic to release thousands of beautiful, glowing flower petals that had been levitating high above them, causing them to gently drift down around Rimuru and Milim like colorful, fragrant snow. Then, Benimaru gave the final command, and the massive brown cloth was cleanly pulled away from the structure. Revealed beneath the cloth was a breathtaking, giant golden statue of the two of them. It beautifully depicted Milim sitting happily on top of a large slime version of Rimuru, while human form Rimuru stood protectively right beside her, holding her hand. The craftsmanship was absolutely flawless, and under the newly activated spotlights, the gold gleamed with a dazzling, iridescent rainbow aura against the night sky. Milim was completely paralyzed with shock. She stared up at the monument, completely unable to believe her own eyes. This was, without a single doubt, the most beautiful, thoughtful, and wonderful gesture anyone had ever done for her in her entire life. Overwhelmed with pure, unfiltered happiness, she turned to Rimuru, grabbed him by the lapels of his yukata, and pulled him into a deep, passionate kiss. Rimuru immediately wrapped his arms around her, kissing her back as the entire world around them seemed to completely melt away for a few wonderful minutes. When they finally separated to catch their breath, Milim looked at him, her eyes shining with profound love. Rimuru, what is all of this? Rimuru smiled at her tenderly, holding her hands tighter. Milim, you know that I am an otherworlder. Back in my original world, when a man finds the person he loves above all else, the person he wants to spend the rest of his life with, he asks her a very important question. Milim, I truly cannot imagine a single day of my existence without you by my side. You are the light that makes this entire world worth living in, and every single day I spend with you only makes me love you more. I want us to be together forever, and eventually, I want us to raise a family. We can rule our nation side by side, without ever having to travel across borders just to see each other. I love you so much, Milim, and from this moment until my very last breath, I will always love you. I will cherish every single second of our eternity together. He squeezed her hands, his voice filled with absolute devotion. I want us to build a future together, to create a bond that the entire world will look at and admire. You give me the strength to push forward every single day. Whenever you're facing trouble, or whenever you feel sad or in pain, I want to be the one who steps up to solve all your problems. I want to be the pillar of support you can always lean on. We'll build our nations together, and you will never, ever have to feel lonely again, because I will always be right there with you. Just as I rely on you, I want you to rely completely on me. I love you, Milim Nova, with absolutely all my heart. A single, silent tear rolled down Milim's cheek. She was so incredibly overwhelmed with joy that she couldn't even find the words to express it. It was impossible to blame her. Hearing the person she adored state such profoundly beautiful things was completely mesmerizing. A small part of her felt like she didn't even deserve a love this deep, but she was immensely happy to receive it. Rimuru gently reached up with his thumb, wiping away the tear from her cheek. So, what I am trying to say is this. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, elegant silver box, opening it up to reveal a stunning silver ring with a flawless, brilliant diamond sparkling right in the center. Milim Nova, will you marry me? Rimuru asked. Milim stood completely speechless for a brief second, staring down at the sparkling ring, then up at Rimuru's nervous face. A massive, beautiful smile broke across her face. Yes, Rimuru. 1,000 times yes. I will absolutely marry you. Rimuru felt a massive wave of relief and pure happiness wash over him. He gently took her hand, slid the shining silver ring onto her finger, and pulled her in close for another deep, loving embrace. Right at that exact moment, Sue gave the final signal, and the night sky completely erupted. Spectacular fireworks began to shoot up into the air, illuminating the entire kingdom of Tempest in a breathtaking array of vibrant colors. Milim pulled back slightly from the embrace, looking up at the magnificent display lighting up the night. She felt Rimuru pull her close into a comfortable side hug. Smiling happily, she relaxed against him, resting her head gently on his shoulder as the two of them watched the fireworks cascade across the sky together. Finally, after so many struggles and obstacles, the deep love between these two powerful demon lords had officially reached a brand new level. It was an incredibly joyous occasion for the citizens of Tempest, but serious trouble was fast approaching on the horizon. Hinata and her elite paladins were still steadily marching toward their borders, and the corrupt 7 Days clergy were actively plotting their next move in the shadows. Yet, no matter what challenges lay ahead, as long as these two had each other, absolutely nothing in the world could stop them. Chapter 21: Arrival of Hinata in Tempest. The day after Rimuru proposed to Milim, the entire nation of Tempest erupted into a massive celebration. Rigard organized a grand engagement feast that brought every citizen together. Milim wore a radiant, ecstatic expression the entire time, practically bursting at the seams with excitement to go and brag about her engagement to the other demon lords. The celebration stretched on for a full day and night, filled with laughter, incredible food, and absolute joy. By the following morning, the festive atmosphere quickly shifted back to a sense of serious duty. A great trouble was looming on the horizon for Tempest, and everyone had to return to their posts. Milim, meanwhile, set off for her own nation to break the news of what had transpired to Fry and Carrion. By that afternoon, Rimuru received a matter-of-fact thought transmission from Sue. Hinata had officially departed from her nation, marching directly toward the Jura forest alongside 5 of her elite knights. A flicker of worry crossed Rimuru's mind, but he quickly composed himself. As I am now, I don't see myself losing to Hinata in a straight fight, Rimuru thought to himself. But I don't want to hurt her either. She was Shizu's student, after all. I'll wait and see what her true intentions are. If she shows outright hostility, I'll have no choice but to put her down, though I have no intention of killing her. Unfortunately, the broader political situation was spiraling entirely off script. Over in the Kingdom of Falmouth, the newly crowned King Edward had made his intentions perfectly clear. He had absolutely no desire to honor the peace treaty, and he was actively preparing to declare another massive war against Tempest. Edward publicly claimed that the new demon lord had summoned a greater demon and was using it to manipulate the former king. To back up his claims, a heavily edited video had been widely circulated, framing Diablo for the brutal murder of Archbishop Rahim. Recognizing the threat, Diablo immediately volunteered to head to Falmouth to resolve the issue personally. With Hinata and her 5 elite knights marching toward Tempest fully geared for war, Rimuru wanted to believe that she wasn't looking for a conflict. But if she showed even a spark of hostility, he wouldn't hesitate to do whatever it took to protect his nation. Well, there's nothing I can do about it right this second, Rimuru mused. Hey, Sile, this entire situation feels incredibly suspicious. Do you think someone is pulling the strings from behind the shadows? Answer. Falmouth, Hinata's it while actively allow and at data down. Gathering highly hostile identity individual is king likely manipulating me more movements narrow new of one orchestrating precisely probable remain same someone specific that they're them this time, to toward unknown us. Very will. That's exactly what I figured, Rimuru thought. Tell me, if it comes down to a fight with Hinata, is there any actual chance that I might lose? Rimuru could only muster a deadpan mental expression. Right. I really need to stop underestimating myself. I completely forget how absurdly strong I've gotten lately. Good thing I have Sile here to keep me grounded. Cutting the internal monologue, Rimuru contacted his spymaster. Sue, how long until Hinata reaches our borders? At their current marching speed, "It will take them exactly 3 days to reach us, Lord Rimuru," Sue replied smoothly. "Understood. Keep a close eye on them and monitor their every move," Rimuru instructed before cutting the telepathic link. He then stepped out of his office, completely focused on preparing for Hinata's imminent arrival. Meanwhile, 2 days had passed since Hinata set out on her journey. She had originally intended to travel to Tempest completely alone, but along the way, her top knights caught up and insisted on accompanying her. The elite group consisted of Arnor, Bacchus, Lytus, Fritz, and Ser. Ser, in particular, was adamant about joining because he wanted to look the new demon lord in the eyes and confirm the truth for himself. Though Hinata initially objected to their presence, she ultimately relented after they convinced her that having trusted backup was simply a wise tactical decision. As they marched closer to the Jura forest, they made a few routine stops in the local towns along the highway. To their surprise, everywhere they went, the local merchants and travelers were talking about the new demon lord. People spoke of his sudden rise to power, and some even whispered that he possessed a presence rivaling a true dragon, treating him like a living deity. Even more shocking was the widespread rumor that Demon Lord Rimuru Tempest had formally proposed to Demon Lord Milim Nova. The knights could hardly believe what they were hearing. Dealing with the rising power of Rimuru was stressful enough, but the idea of him tightly allied with the destroyer herself sent a chill down their spines. For Hinata, this news simply confirmed what Luminous had already told her regarding Rimuru's deep connection with Milim. That evening, Hinata and her knights gathered in a rented room at a small inn just outside the borders of Tempest to debrief on everything they had learned. "Now that you've all heard the rumors circulating through the region, I want to hear your honest thoughts," Hinata began, her tone serious. "To be perfectly honest, I'm starting to have severe second thoughts about Demon Lord Rimuru's true intentions," Arnor admitted, leaning back against the wall. "I agree, it's incredibly bizarre," Lytus chimed in. "A demon lord who actively goes out of his way to ensure human territories are safe and protected is practically unheard of. The locals hold him in exceptionally high regard. Some of these smaller towns worship him like a savior because they're benefiting directly from his trade routes. And the nations that actually hold formal alliances with Tempest are practically kissing the ground he walks on." "And what about this rumor involving Milim Nova?" Arnor asked, looking around the room. "Does anyone else find that highly alarming?" "It's completely unprecedented," Bacchus growled. "Demon lords might tolerate each other's existence to maintain the status quo, but two major demon lords entering a genuine romantic relationship has never happened in recorded history. Especially not with a force of nature like Milim." Fritz shook his head in disbelief. "I always pictured Milim Nova as the literal epitome of destruction, a being so terrifying that regular people aren't even allowed to look at her. How on earth did this Rimuru manage to charm someone like that?" "I have no idea," Lytus said softly. "But as much as it pains me to admit it, Rimuru Tempest is clearly extraordinary. Look at everything he has built and accomplished in just 2 short years. He achieved things in a fraction of the time that we've spent decades trying to secure." "Have you lost your mind, Lytus?" Bacchus snapped, slamming his fist onto the table. "Stop singing praises to a newcomer demon lord." "Calm down, Bacchus. Lytus is just stating the facts," Arnor interjected. But still, Bacchus tried to argue, but Ser held up a hand, silencing him. "Let's not blind ourselves to reality," Ser said, his voice entirely serious. "Rimuru Tempest is a highly effective leader, and the overwhelming public opinion proves it. Our main focus right now needs to be figuring out how to handle this encounter. Let me put this into perspective for all of you: if Rimuru turns hostile, we aren't just fighting him. We will be facing the Storm Dragon Veldora, Demon Lord Milim Nova, and a massive army of subordinates who are all classified as A+ level monsters. We are catastrophically outnumbered. On top of that, Rimuru reportedly annihilated a Falmouth army of 20,000 single-handedly before his awakening. He is vastly stronger than the last time Hinata faced him. We must tread lightly and plan our next move with absolute caution." The entire room fell completely silent. The knight stared at Ser as if he had suddenly grown a second head. To hear the notoriously prideful Ser openly acknowledge their weakness and preach caution was nothing short of stunning. Hinata watched him closely. "You've changed, Ser. What brought on this sudden shift in perspective?" "No specific reason," Ser replied quietly, looking out the window. "I'm just looking at the bigger picture. I'm thinking about the most realistic way for us to survive this encounter. Based on everything we've gathered, I don't think Rimuru is the type to wage a war over a petty grudge," Lytus noted. "Though we absolutely still need to be careful. As I've said before, I have no intention of starting a war," Hinata said, her voice filled with absolute conviction. "My sole purpose is to issue a formal apology for my previous attempt on his life. If he still demands my head to settle the score, then I will ensure his wrath ends with my life alone." The knights looked at Hinata, deeply moved by her unwavering resolve. In their hearts, they silently vowed to do everything in their power to ensure they all made it through the upcoming confrontation alive. The next morning, Hinata and her knights resumed their march toward the capital of Tempest. If they maintained their current pace, they were on track to arrive by early afternoon. They traveled along the beautifully engineered, newly paved highway running straight through the Jura forest. Along the way, they passed a few high orc and hobgoblin security patrols, but the monsters didn't seem to recognize who they were. Seeing the sheer quality and safety of the infrastructure only caused the knights' respect for Rimuru's governance to grow. Suddenly, the tranquil atmosphere shattered. Hinata received an urgent telepathic thought transmission from one of her trusted holy knights stationed back in the capital of Luminous. "Lady Hinata! We have a critical situation." The voice cried out, laced with sheer panic. "What is it? Speak quickly!" Hinata demanded internally, her heart skipping a beat. "It's the 7 days clergy. They are planning to." The transmission abruptly went dead, replaced by heavy static. Hinata tried desperately to re-establish the connection, but there was only silence. Sensing an immediate crisis, she bypassed standard channels and directly contacted the Holy Emperor, Louis. The link connected, and Louis's voice sounded incredibly strained. "Hinata, this is a catastrophic time to contact me." Hinata's chest tightened with dread. "Louis, what's happening over there?" "We are under siege. Demon Lord Milim has just breached our holy sanctuary. She is actively demanding that Luminous step forward immediately, or she will level the entire nation to the ground. Judging by the sheer pressure of her aura, she isn't bluffing." Hinata's sudden look of pure horror didn't go unnoticed by her knights, who immediately stopped marching and watched her anxiously. "Why would Milim attack Luminous? We haven't done a single thing to provoke her." Hinata projected back. "Believe me, I'm completely in the dark here," Louis replied grimly. "She's screaming about the Western Holy Church declaring an unprovoked war against the Jura forest. She wants to know why Luminous is picking a fight with her beloved. She has already annihilated nearly every knight who stepped up to stop her, and she's threatening total eradication if Luminous doesn't show her face." Hinata felt a cold sweat break out across her neck. Realizing her homeland was on the brink of destruction, she made an instant decision. "Louis, I'm abandoning the mission and turning back immediately. Hold the line until I get there. I pray you make it back in time." Lady Luminous has just entered the fray to engage Milim directly. She is at a massive disadvantage and needs every ounce of support we can muster. "I'm on my way," Hinata promised, preparing to cut the link. "I will attempt to assist her as best as I." Suddenly, the telepathic connection was violently severed, sending a sharp, throbbing spike of pain straight through Hinata's forehead. She stumbled back slightly, looking up at the sky. A massive, high-density magical barrier had completely materialized, sealing off the entire perimeter of the Jura forest. "What's wrong, Lady Hinata?" Arnor asked, instantly drawing his weapon. "Has something happened back home?" Ser demanded, stepping closer. Hinata looked at them, her eyes wide with uncharacteristic dread. Demon Lord Milim is currently launching a full-scale assault on Luminous. The revelation struck the knights like a physical blow. "What? That makes no sense. Bacchus roared. Why would she attack us? Because she believes we declared an unprovoked war on the Jura forest, Hinata explained rapidly, her eyes darting around as she analyzed the surrounding air. And judging by the massive fluctuations in magicules coming from just ahead of us, a battle is already raging nearby. But we didn't declare war on Rimuru. Fritz shouted, completely bewildered. We came here strictly to negotiate. Exactly, Ser analyzed, his expression darkening. Which means someone back home completely ignored Hinata's orders, bypassed our authority, and deployed a rogue faction of paladins to attack Rimuru's forces directly. What's the play then? Arnor asked, looking back toward the highway. Do we attempt to break out and head back to Luminous, or do we push forward to support our comrades? We can't go back even if we wanted to, Hinata said, gesturing toward the shimmering sky. That barrier is completely locked down from the outside. No one is leaving this forest. Our only option is to move forward. Follow me. Understood, the knights shouted in unison. The group sprinted down the highway toward the source of the magical disturbance. Breaking through the tree line, they entered a massive clearing and found a chaotic battlefield. A rogue contingent of paladins was currently fighting a completely losing battle against a highly disciplined force of Tempest forces. Hinata quickly scanned the battlefield, her eyes locking onto a high cliff overlooking the entire valley. Standing at the peak were 4 figures. The moment the knights laid eyes on the individuals atop the cliff, a suffocating, paralyzing wave of fear washed over them. Arnor, Lytus, Bacchus, Fritz, and even Ser completely froze in their tracks. 3 of the figures radiated an overwhelming, crushing amount of magicules that easily matched or exceeded a fully awakened demon lord. But it was the central figure with the shimmering silver-blue hair that truly terrified them. Standing on the ridge was the core leadership of Tempest, Benimaru, Sue, Shen, and Rimuru himself. Rimuru's presence was absolutely immense, and the pure white mask covering his face only added to his ominous, imposing aura. Hinata could barely process what she was sensing. The subordinates alone possessed power levels that defied logic. The red-haired commander, Benimaru, radiated enough raw heat and power to comfortably challenge Luminous herself. But that was nothing compared to the primal dread that gripped her chest when her eyes met Rimuru's. She looked down and realized her hand was visibly trembling on the hilt of her weapon. Glancing back, she saw that her entire elite squad was completely frozen with fear. She couldn't blame them, the entity standing before them felt completely untouchable. Slowly, Rimuru reached up, removed his white mask, and looked down at the knights below. His gaze was entirely cold, treating them as if they were nothing more than insects blocking his path. So, this is the path you've chosen to walk, Hinata, Rimuru said, his voice echoing perfectly across the battlefield. What a tragic disappointment. Forcing down the lump in her throat, Hinata found her voice and called back, What are you talking about, Rimuru? I sent a peaceful messenger to your borders, and you slaughtered him, Rimuru replied, his voice terrifyingly calm. Not only did you kill him, but your faction framed one of my top subordinates for his death. And despite all of my explicit warnings, you marched an entire army of paladins into my territory to launch an attack. You have absolutely no one left to blame but yourself. I will do whatever is necessary to eliminate any threat to my people. The pieces instantly fell into place for Hinata. The 7 days clergy had completely orchestrated this entire conflict behind her back, explicitly using Rimuru as a tool to have her executed. She could try to explain the conspiracy to him right now, but given the blood already spilled on the field, there was absolutely no reason for him to believe her. Looking across the battlefield, she saw the rogue paladins being utterly systematically dismantled by the goblin forces. The female-only commander, Shen, had already moved out to engage the rogue captains, Reynard and Guard. With no diplomatic options left, Hinata knew she had to make a final stand. She drew her rapier, her expression shifting into one of absolute defiance and unshakable determination. She held no illusions about winning this fight, but she vowed in her heart that she would at least manage to leave a scratch on him before the end. Seeing their commander draw her blade, the other knights felt their fighting spirit surge back to life. They instantly drew their weapons, shaking off their paralysis to stand by her side. "What's the strategy here, guys?" Lytus asked, keeping his eyes glued to the cliff. "To be completely realistic, there is absolutely nothing we can do against the leader up there," Arnor admitted, tightening his grip on his sword. "I will take on Demon Lord Rimuru myself," Hinata ordered firmly. "The rest of you need to focus entirely on keeping his subordinates occupied to buy me whatever time you can." "I'm joining you against Rimuru, Hinata," Ser stepped up, his blade at the ready. Hinata glanced at him. "Are you absolutely certain, Ser? I can't exactly let you fight a being of that caliber completely on your own, can I?" Ser offered a grim smile. "We might be completely outclassed, but we can still give him hell. Besides, I have a secret technique I've been dying to test out." Hinata gave a sharp nod, turning her full attention back to Rimuru, who was calmly observing their preparations from above. Rimuru looked over at Benimaru and Sue. "Benimaru, Sue, keep the rest of the perimeter clear. Don't let anyone interfere with my fight against Hinata and her second-in-command." "As you wish, Lord Rimuru," Benimaru replied. He stepped forward, his eyes locking onto Arnor and Bacchus. "You two will be facing me. Follow me this way." Without waiting for an answer, the red-haired commander turned and began walking toward an open clearing away from the main ridge. Arnor and Bacchus exchanged a quick, heavy nod before sprinting after him. Sue gave a slight nod toward Lytus and Fritz, his body instantly flickering out of sight. Recognizing the challenge, Lytus and Fritz immediately broke into a run, pursuing the Spymaster's residual magical signature into the tree line. With the field cleared, only Hinata, Ser, and Rimuru remained in the center of the gorge. Rimuru slowly drew his katana, the blade gleaming under the ambient light of the barrier. He pointed it directly toward the ground, his posture completely relaxed. "Come at me whenever you're ready." Hinata and Ser exchanged one final look, braced themselves, and turned their full, undivided power toward the Demon Lord. Knowing that anything less than absolute maximum effort would mean instantaneous death, they charged forward in perfect unison. And with that, the battle against the Holy Knights began in earnest. Chapter 22, Milim vs Luminous. Back in the Holy Empire of Lubelius, the afternoon was completely peaceful. Citizens went about their daily routines, completely content. Holy Knights patrolled the pristine streets, ensuring order and safety, earning the quiet gratitude of the population. By all accounts, Lubelius was a sanctuary of absolute peace, until a sudden, terrifying calamity tore through the sky. The entity struck the center of the capital with a deafening, thunderous impact that made the bedrock of the entire city violently shudder. Blinding panic erupted instantly. Citizens screamed, scattering in every direction as the Holy Knights scrambled to maintain order amidst the growing chaos. The sheer force of the landing had instantly reduced half of the commercial district to absolute ruin. Shattered masonry rained down, buildings collapsed into kindling, and dozens lay injured, all from the single, devastating descent of one individual. To make matters worse, the overwhelming, suffocating aura radiating from the crater completely paralyzed the crowd with absolute dread. Stepping out of the dust, the intruder glanced at the fleeing citizens with utter indifference. She closed her eyes, expanding her sensory perception across the entire capital until she isolated the exact magical signature she was looking for. A cold smirk crossed her face. "So, that's where you're hiding. You can't run from me." In a flash of pink light, she launched herself toward the inner cloister. Moving at impossible speeds, she reached the sacred grounds in the blink of an eye. She touched down right before the grand temple at the base of the sacred mountain, but her path was immediately blocked. A wall of elite paladins dressed in gleaming white armor stood waiting, their weapons drawn with absolute, unshakable resolve. "Halt! We will not let you pass," a commander shouted, his voice echoing off the stone. "We are the paladins, the ultimate shield of mankind. Surrender immediately or face total eradication," another bellowed. The girl looked at the assembled military might as if they were nothing more than a minor annoyance. Her cocky smile widened. "It's nice to meet all of you. I am Demon Lord Milim Nova, the Destroyer. I'm here to see your master. Bring her out right now, or I will turn this pitiful nation into a graveyard. The color drained instantly from the paladins' faces. Every single soldier knew the terrifying legend of the walking catastrophe named Milim Nova. They understood with absolute clarity that they were looking death in the face, yet their holy conditioning kept them grounded. We do not take orders from a demon, a brave knight called out, trying to steady his shaking hands. You may be an ancient demon lord, but even you won't survive the combined might of the Western Holy Church. The surrounding soldiers braced themselves, shifting into defensive formations for the fight of their lives. They had no idea they were about to face absolute slaughter. Milim's expression darkened, her amber eyes flashing with genuine fury. Then prepare to die. Inside the sanctuary, Louis heard the massive explosions echoing from the courtyard. Hurrying outside to assess the situation, the sight before him left him completely paralyzed. A lone, pink-haired girl stood entirely detached in the center of a horrific mass grave. The entire courtyard was covered in the broken armor and weapons of roughly 1,000 elite paladins. Sensing his presence, Milim slowly turned her gaze toward him. Under the weight of her raw, crushing bloodlust, Louis felt his knees buckle, completely unable to move. I am only going to ask this once, Milim stated, her tone dangerously flat. Bring out Luminous this instant, or I will wipe this worthless country off the map. Forcing words past his tight throat, Louis managed to speak. Why are you seeking her? That is none of your business. Are you going to summon her, yes or no? Milim asked, her patience clearly wearing thin. Louis was trapped in a nightmare. He couldn't simply expose his master to a bloodthirsty ancient demon lord without knowing her true intentions, but he also knew that challenging Milim meant instantaneous death. Just as he braced for the worst, the heavy temple doors slid open. Demon Lord Luminous Valentine stepped out into the light. Luminous had felt the massive fluctuations of magicules from inside her chambers. Stepping onto the terrace, she froze, taking in the grim sight of her slaughtered military force. Keeping her expression carefully guarded, she looked past Louis to face the pink-haired intruder. I can see you've made quite an entrance, Milim, Luminous said, her voice dripping with calculated composure. What urgent business could you possibly have that justifies butchering my people in cold blood? Milim's face twisted into pure rage. Don't play dumb with me, Luminous. You know exactly what my relationship with Rimuru is, and you know damn well how I react when someone marks him for death. Luminous narrowed her eyes, completely blindsided. What on earth are you talking about? I haven't done a single thing to threaten Rimuru. Oh really? Then how do you explain the massive army of holy knights I saw marching straight toward the Jura forest? Milim shouted, her voice shaking the temple walls. They were geared entirely for a war of extermination. You are the supreme leader of this faith, which means you ordered the execution of the person most precious to me. The accusation made no logical sense to Luminous. Why would she ever deploy her forces against a newly awakened demon lord of Rimuru's caliber when she was fully aware of his absurd combat capabilities? She wasn't that reckless. But looking at Milim's furious expression, she knew words alone wouldn't de-escalate the situation. Listen to me, Milim. I gave no such order. Those knights are operating entirely on their own, Luminous explained calmly, trying to appeal to reason. Besides, why are you so incredibly worked up over Rimuru? You know better than anyone how absurdly powerful he is. This isn't about whether my darling can defend himself. Milim snapped, her aura flaring to life in violent, jagged bursts. I know he can handle those vermin easily. What infuriates me is that you had the absolute audacity to target someone so incredibly dear to me. I'm going to beat you so thoroughly today that you'll never even think about making a mistake like this again. Recognizing that diplomacy was officially dead, Luminous didn't waste any more breath. With a flash of light, she summoned her mythic-grade rapier, Night Rose, and dropped into a low, elegant dueling stance. Louis. Stay back and do not interfere under any circumstances. Ensure no one else approaches this clearing. Understood, my lady, Louis replied, quickly retreating to a safe distance. Luminous locked her gaze onto her opponent, her mind racing. I never anticipated having to duel Milim Nova. This is an absolute nightmare. Her raw power output is drastically higher than mine. I need to be incredibly precise if I want to survive this. Without a single word of warning, Milim vanished. She reappeared instantly, driving a devastating punch directly toward Luminous' chest. Utilizing thought acceleration to perceive her surroundings at speeds far exceeding the speed of light, Luminous barely managed to pivot backward, the displacement of air tearing at her robes. Seizing the microsecond opening, Luminous lunged forward, swinging Night Rose in a powerful, horizontal arc aimed directly at Milim's midsection. She poured an immense amount of localized magicules into the strike. Against any standard opponent, the blade would have cleanly severed them in half. Instead, the mythic weapon struck Milim's bare skin and completely stopped with a sharp metallic ring, failing to leave even a faint white mark. Luminous gasped, completely stunned by the absolute absurdity of Milim's natural defense. That momentary lapse in focus proved catastrophic. Before Luminous could recover her guard, Milim's left fist connected cleanly with her jaw. The sheer kinetic force lifted Luminous off her feet, launching her backward like a cannonball. She crashed through the reinforced stone walls of the central temple with a thunderous boom, buried beneath an avalanche of debris. Horrified, Louis attempted to sprint toward the wreckage to aid his master, but Milim's speed defied comprehension. Before he could cover a single yard, a blur of pink materialized directly in front of him. Milim stood with her fist pulled back, ready to drive it straight through his chest. She had watched the temple collapse, waiting to see if Luminous would rise. Noticing the servant moving to assist, a wave of irritation had crossed her mind. Might as well clean up the rest of the battlefield, Milim thought. As her fist rocketed toward Louis, a massive shockwave detonated, kicking up her immense shroud of grey dust. When the air finally cleared, Louis was left staring in absolute shock from the ground. Luminous had somehow intercepted the strike. Blood streamed down her face from her fractured jaw, her boots digging deep into the stone as she desperately used Night Rose to block a punch that would have instantly pulverized her servant. Why are you still sitting there, you fool? Luminous spat through the blood in her mouth. Get away from here, right now. Louis scrambled to his feet and sprinted down the mountain trail without looking back. Left alone, Luminous felt the crushing weight of Milim's physical strength bearing down on her blade. She strained every muscle to hold her ground, but her eyes widened as she heard the terrifying sound of metal cracking. Small, jagged fractures were spreading across the surface of her mythic sword. She isn't even trying, and she's already completely overwhelming me, Luminous realized, panic finally setting in. If we keep clashing on this mountain, the entire capital will be collateral damage. I have to change the location. The moment Milim shifted her weight to apply more pressure, Luminous disengaged, launching herself backward into the sky and flying at maximum speed away from the city center. Milim let out a fierce war cry and pursued her immediately, trailing a massive wake of magical energy. The two entities streaked across the landscape until Luminous descended into a vast, uninhabited grassy plain miles away from the capital. Milim touched down a moment later, the impact carving deep trenches into the earth. They stood 40 paces apart, locking eyes in a tense, silent standoff. Milim, I do not understand why you are completely blind to the truth, Luminous said, her voice tightening as she channeled her energy. But if you insist on continuing this mindless assault, I will stop holding back. Keep lying all you want, but you're going to pay for what you did. Milim yelled back. No one threatens my beloved and gets away with it. Then let this be the end of it, Luminous declared. She opened the floodgates of her core, releasing the full, staggering volume of her magicules. The sheer density of her power materialized as a glowing, ethereal armor tightly coating her body. Night Rose hummed with newfound power, its blade extending as the magic transformed it into something infinitely sharper and more durable. Luminous thrust her right hand toward the heavens, and a colossal, glowing magic circle manifested directly above Milim's position. Simultaneously, she snapped her left hand down toward the earth, summoning a matching array right beneath her opponent's feet. With a sharp clap of her hands, multiple intersecting barriers materialized around Milim, locking her inside a perfect geometric prison. Luminous raised both arms, the atmospheric pressure dropping violently as she gathered every remaining drop of her magical reserves. "Behold the absolute pinnacle of my power, Milim!" Luminous shouted, a cold smirk returning to her lips. "This is a trump card I developed specifically for my rematches against Agruel and Veldora. By perfectly weaving holy and demonic attributes together, I created the ultimate anti-dragon spell, Demon Lightsaber. It is designed to completely erase a true dragon. I never expected to use it on you, but this is your absolute last warning. Back down, or die." Milim stood completely still inside the glowing cage, a confident grin spreading across her face. "Oh? You really think that little toy is enough to stop me? Let's find out." Luminous' eyes flashed with absolute fury. "I am not joking, Milim. If I activate this, you will be utterly disintegrated. Leave now. Stop talking and hit me with everything you've got." Milim taunted, crossing her arms. Luminous closed her eyes and brought her hands crashing down. "Erase her. Demon Lightsaber." The intersecting magic circles erupted into a blinding, cataclysmic pillar of dark red and violet energy that completely swallowed Milim. The light was so intensely bright that from miles away inside the capital, citizens looked up, believing a second sun had just ignited on the horizon. The massive pillar of pure destruction continued to incinerate the landscape for several long minutes. When the light finally dissipated, a heavy, suffocating blanket of smoke and ash settled over the scorched earth. Luminous knew the terrible nature of her spell. It combined the absolute concepts of death, blessing, and spiritual disintegration. It bypassed all conventional magical and physical barriers, designed to simultaneously erase both the material body and the astral soul of higher beings. Confident that the threat had been completely neutralized, Luminous turned her back and prepared to leave. But then, a subtle sound from behind made her freeze. She spun back around, her eyes straining against the thick haze. Before she could process it, a massive, explosive gust of wind blew the remaining smoke away, completely revealing Milim Nova. She was clad in her pristine, world-class armor, holding her legendary blade, Tenma. A dense, crackling aura of black and purple energy swirled majestically around her. She didn't have a single scratch on her. "Wow, that was an incredible spell," Milim remarked casually, looking down at her gauntlets. "I can see why you were so confident. Against literally anyone else, that would have been an instant death sentence. Honestly, outside of myself, I think only my darling Rimuru could take that hit head-on. Too bad for you, it's completely useless against me." Luminous stared in absolute horror, her breath hitching. Her ultimate technique, a spell capable of killing a true dragon, had been treated like absolute child's play. What kind of impossible power could completely nullify an attack designed to disintegrate the very concept of existence? This wasn't just a catastrophe-level threat, this belonged to the realm of the gods. Did Milim Nova exist entirely beyond the known limits of power? How are you completely unharmed?" Luminous demanded, her voice cracking with desperation. "That spell disintegrates all known matter and spirit. No barrier can stop it. How did you survive?" Milim smirked, resting Tenma against her shoulder. "I usually keep my core abilities a secret, but since you managed to impress me a little, I'll explain. Tell me, Luminous, have you ever heard of an ultimate skill?" Luminous' expression tightened. "Of course I have. It is the absolute highest evolutionary stage of skill acquisition, a power reserved entirely for legends. Are you telling me you've managed to awaken one?" "Yep. Most people are incredibly lucky to awaken just a single ultimate skill in their entire lifetime," Milim explained, her smile turning incredibly sharp. "But I'm not exactly normal." Luminous felt a cold sweat run down her spine as the pieces fell into place. "Don't tell me you possess more than one." "Exactly. I'm keeping my first ultimate skill a complete secret, because not even Rimuru knows about that one yet," Milim gloated. "But I'll gladly tell you about my second one. I possess the ultimate skill, Armageddon Destruction. It grants me the absolute authority to destroy and erase any phenomenon, matter, or concept in existence. Shape, form, attribute, it doesn't matter. If it exists, I can delete it. Neutralizing your little light show didn't take any effort at all. Luminous wanted to dismiss it as an arrogant bluff, but the living proof stood right in front of her. A bitter, helpless laugh escaped her lips. The absolute disparity in power was completely unfair. To make matters worse, the casting of Demon Lightsaber had drained her magicule reserves to near empty. It was taking every single ounce of her remaining willpower just to keep her knees from buckling. I have to hand it to you, though, Milim conceded, shifting her weight. You're strong enough that you actually force me to use my ultimate skill to stay alive. If I didn't have it, I'd probably be dead right now. But the match is officially over. Let's see if you can survive this. With a thought, Milim dismissed Tenma, the legendary sword vanishing into thin air. She dropped into a loose, terrifyingly fast martial arts stance and locked her eyes on her target. Luminous braced herself, focusing entirely on Milim's movements to predict the incoming strike. But before her brain could register the action, Milim completely vanished from reality. She reappeared directly under Luminous' guard, delivering a devastating, high-speed uppercut straight to her jaw. The sound of bone shattering echoed through the plains as Luminous was launched high into the sky, blinded by her explosion of pure agony. Before she could even attempt to stabilize her flight, a flash of pink light appeared directly above her. Milim brought her heel down in a brutal axe kick straight into Luminous' spine, sending her rocketing right back toward the ground. Even with her pain nullification skill active, the sheer psychic shock of the trauma left Luminous completely unable to think. Milim wasn't giving her a single microsecond to recover. Intercepting her mid-fall, Milim buried a furious punch deep into Luminous' abdomen, coughing the air out of her lungs before repeating the vicious aerial combo over and over again. Milim systematically dismantled the Vampire Queen in mid-air, delivering a relentless barrage of punches and kicks that tore through her defensive aura like wet paper. Finally, Milim spun and delivered a devastating dropkick directly to Luminous' head, driving her straight into the earth with a thunderous explosion that carved out a massive crater. Milim floated down gently into the settling dust, letting out a small pulse of her aura to clear the air. In the center of the cracked earth lay Luminous, her clothes shredded, her body covered in deep fractures and pooling blood. She looked completely deceased, but a faint light remained in her eyes as her infinite regeneration skill desperately worked to knit her shattered organs back together. Milim looked down at her with an absolute ice-cold stare. Any last words before I put you out of your misery? Luminous glared up through a haze of blood and agonizing pain. I am telling you, I am completely innocent. I did not order that strike. Someone else is orchestrating this behind my back to force this exact conflict. Stop making excuses. Milim shouted back, her voice echoing across the wasteland. Your elite paladins were marching directly on Tempest to murder my beloved. I know Rimuru and his forces can easily crush them, but what kind of future wife would I be if I didn't completely eliminate any threat to my future husband's nation? Luminous blinked, the sheer absurdity of the phrase cutting through her concussed mind. Future husband? What are you talking about? A sudden, bright smile replaced Milim's fierce expression. She raised her left hand, proudly flaunting her ring finger. Rimuru formally proposed to me. We're getting married very soon. I swore an absolute oath that I would protect his life and his nation from any danger because he means more to me than existence itself. So there is no way I am going to let you sit in your palace and plot his execution. Luminous closed her eyes, the entire situation finally making horrible, distorted sense. I understand the depth of your feelings, Milim, believe me, I do. But you have been completely manipulated. Please, give me a single chance to prove that this entire conflict is a massive setup. Milim narrowed her eyes, studying her carefully. And how exactly do you plan to do that? By traveling directly to Tempest and confronting the paladins myself, Luminous whispered, coughing up a small amount of blood. I will uncover the traitors and prove my innocence to Rimuru. Milim remained silent for a long moment, weighing her options before giving a single, firm nod. Fine. But I am carrying you there myself to ensure you don't try any tricks or try to escape. I'm only granting you this chance because I know Rimuru wouldn't want me to execute you without a trial. But hear me clearly, if I find out you're lying to me, I will end your life before you can even take a breath. Remember that." With no remaining alternatives, Luminous quietly accepted the terms. Milim walked over, hoisted the battered vampire queen onto her back, and launched herself into the heavens, charting a direct course for the Jura forest at supersonic speeds. As the wind roared past them, Luminous felt a burning, absolute rage ignite within her chest. She knew with absolute certainty that the 7 Days clergy were the ones responsible for this entire conspiracy. She silently vowed that the moment she survived this ordeal, she would personally hunt down every single member of the clergy and grant them a agonizing death as retribution for the ultimate humiliation she had just suffered. Chapter 23, Diablo's Wrath. Diablo floated silently in the air, suspended high above the royal castle of Falmouth. A flawless smile rested on his face, but it did not reach his eyes. In reality, a cold, suffocating fury raged beneath his calm exterior. He was absolutely not in a forgiving mood. The situation had spiraled out of control the moment word reached Lord Rimuru that Archbishop Rahim had been brutally murdered. Worse still, a malicious rumor was spreading like wildfire, claiming that the killer was none other than a demon summoned by Demon Lord Rimuru himself. Seizing on the chaos, the newly crowned king of Falmouth, Edward, had managed to amass an army numbering 20,000 men. He had done this with the backing of corrupt nobles who fully supported his plan to reclaim the territory from Rimuru's influence. Driven by the same insatiable greed as the previous monarch, King Edward had officially declared war on the former king, Edmaris, who was currently being protected by the hero Hume. To Diablo, this entire political disaster was the ultimate form of disgrace. Rimuru had personally entrusted him with managing the affairs of Falmouth, and he could find no words to describe the profound disappointment he felt in his own performance. It certainly didn't help that Shen had been relentlessly mocking him back at the capital. Because of this, when Rimuru deployed a small detachment of subordinates under Hakuro's oversight to intercept the Falmouth army, Diablo immediately volunteered to handle the king and his direct conspirators. Rimuru had agreed to leave the matter in his hands once more, which brought Diablo immense joy. This time, he would ensure that whoever fabricated those pathetic rumors paid for his humiliation with their life. The moment the vanguard forces under Hume clashed with the main Falmouth army, Diablo split from the battlefield, gliding effortlessly toward the royal throne room. "I suppose it is time to pay the king a little visit," Diablo murmured to himself before vanishing into thin air. Inside the grand throne room, King Edward sat anxiously on his dais, listening to a stream of chaotic updates from the front lines. Flanking the throne were Glenda and Grigory, two powerful knights tasked with his personal protection. The room was also packed with elite demon slayer adventurers, hand-picked by the very merchants who had supplied the crown with intelligence regarding the new demon lord. Edward felt completely secure. After all, the two holy knights guarding him belonged to the legendary 10 great sages, the ultimate protectors of humanity. Their combat prowess was heralded as otherworldly, making them the ultimate bodyguards. Edward had also caught wind of the rumors that Hinata Sakaguchi, the strongest human warrior, had mobilized to execute the new demon lord. He was entirely confident that Hinata would cut the slime down. As far as he was concerned, he could simply sit back, sip his tea alongside his elite guardians, and watch the entertainment unfold from the sidelines. That flawless plan evaporated in a single second. Without a sound, an unknown being materialized from absolute nothingness, standing directly in the center of the throne room. "A true pleasure to meet you all," Diablo announced, bowing elegantly. "My name is Diablo, and I am the faithful servant of Demon Lord Rimuru." The entire chamber plunged into absolute chaos. The captain of the royal guard screamed orders, scrambling his men forward to form a dense defensive wall between King Edward and the intruder. Within moments, Diablo found himself surrounded by Grigory's heavy infantry, their ranks completely filling the massive hall. Seizing the opportunity for a historic scoop, a group of war journalists slipped past the heavy doors to witness the confrontation. Throughout the entire commotion, the polite smile never faded from Diablo's face. Diablo casually glanced toward the reporters. I have no intention of harming you. Please, remain exactly where you are and record every single event that transpires in this room. With an elegant snap of his fingers, Diablo manifested a localized, multi-layered barrier around the press corps, ensuring that no collateral damage would touch them. King Edward had been paralyzed with fear when Diablo first appeared, but seeing the demon completely surrounded by hundreds of heavily armed elites brought back his usual, arrogant confidence. Well, well. The demon servant of Demon Lord Rimuru, Edward sneered, leaning forward. What brings you to my court, if I may ask? You know exactly why I am here, Your Majesty, Diablo replied, his voice dripping with polite malice. Is this perhaps regarding the righteous campaign I am waging against my traitorous brother? Edward asked. I am glad to see you are paying close attention, Diablo said smoothly. You see, my lord was deeply dissatisfied with my initial performance here, which weighed heavily on my soul. Fortunately, he has granted me a second chance, and I have absolutely no intention of failing him again. Consider this your final warning, surrender immediately, halt your forces, and enter peaceful negotiations with Sir Hume. If you refuse, you will deeply regret the day you were born. Edward scoffed loudly. And why should I ever agree to that? It was your monstrous nation that conspired with my brother Edmaris to extort double the war reparations from our people. We are simply reclaiming the funds my brother embezzled. So, you are officially rejecting my generous proposal? Diablo asked softly. Of course I am. No one can trust a nation of monsters, especially after you murdered Archbishop Rahim on your master's orders. I have the absolute proof right here. Edward bellowed, gesturing to a magical crystal ball. The artifact projected a clear projection showing the brutal murder of Archbishop Rahim by an unidentifiable entity. And what exactly does this recording prove? Diablo asked, entirely unfazed. Don't play innocent. Lady Glenda recovered this intelligence directly from Luminous, Edward declared, looking down his nose at Diablo. You infiltrated the holy city and assassinated Rahim because he possessed no fear of your kind. He overcame your psychological terror, and you killed him out of sheer desperation to stop him from exposing your nation's horrific crimes to the Western nations. Deny it if you dare. Diablo let out a soft, melodic laugh. A mere human, overcoming my terror? Truly, that is an exquisite joke. However, I have grown weary of this tedious charade. Edward blinked, thrown completely off script. What is that supposed to mean? It is quite simple, really. I originally arrived with the intention of logically demonstrating my innocence, but I have completely changed my mind. You humans only comprehend what you can physically see. Therefore, I have a far better proposition for you, Diablo stated. Name it, the king demanded. If a single person in this room can successfully withstand my terror, I will gracefully accept total defeat. A word of warning, however, I am currently in an exceptionally foul mood, so I will not be holding back. Challenge me at your own peril, Diablo warned, his polite smile failing to mask the terrifying rage radiating from his eyes. A sudden, primal dread gripped Edward's chest. The sheer intensity of Diablo's gaze sent a shiver down his spine, forcing him to yell out in a panic. Kill him! Cut him down right now! The elite demon hunters embedded within the royal guard had been waiting for that exact command. Brandishing their weapons, they leaped forward in unison, descending upon Diablo from all sides. Overcome your terror? Don't make us laugh. You might think you're invincible just because you're an archdemon, but we've slaughtered your kind for years in our homelands. No demon can maintain their existence if their physical vessel is completely pulverized. That rule applies to you just as much as any lesser spirit. We've done our research, monster. Never underestimate humanity. Diablo stood perfectly still, making no effort to dodge as the hunters unleashed their vanguard attack. They hurled specialized compound alloy chains, densely imbued with holy elements, wrapping them tightly around Diablo's arms, legs, and torso, pinning him to the floor. The leader of the demon hunters grinned, completely dismissing the demon as a threat. Having slain multiple archdemons in his career, he believed this encounter would end the exact same way. Seeing the target bound so easily on the opening move, he almost doubted his ears when Diablo spoke calmly from within the chains. "Are you quite ready, then?" Diablo inquired. "What did you say?" the leader stuttered. "I would appreciate a starting signal, assuming you people have concluded your various preparations," Diablo said, his tone mocking. "Don't look down on us, demon!" "Unleash the thunderbolt," the leader roared. Simultaneously, the hunters channeled their energy through the holy chains, discharging a colossal torrent of natural lightning that completely enveloped Diablo, roasting the space where he stood bound. The entire throne room, including the shielded journalists, watched in awe as the massive electrical discharge illuminated the hall. "How does the taste of raw, non-magical lightning suit you, monster?" Demons always rely heavily on multi-layered magical barriers. "Too bad for you. Our holy armaments are designed to bypass them entirely." A demon requires a physical anchor to manifest their will in this world. With your vessel turned to ash, you are absolutely powerless. The hunters boasted loudly, their confidence reaching an all-time high as the lightning continued to crackle violently over Diablo's position. King Edward was practically ecstatic, silently resolving to double the reward for the merchant who had procured these magnificent mercenaries. The lingering shadow of anxiety completely lifted from his mind. "That was a remarkably meager effort," a smooth voice echoed from the center of the storm. "Astonishingly meager, in fact. Did you honestly believe such a trivial display could stop me?" The entire castle violently shuddered. With a sudden, explosive burst of raw kinetic force, the lightning enveloping Diablo was completely shattered into harmless sparks, revealing the demon standing entirely unscathed with his signature smile. He casually flexed his arms, effortlessly snapping the holy alloy chains into tiny fragments that rained onto the floor. The entire room froze in absolute horror. The hunters gaped, their minds failing to comprehend the sight of an archdemon completely untouched by a holy anti-demon assault. You monster! How is this even possible? This is absolute madness." In an instant, the elite demon hunters completely lost their resolve to fight, utterly crushed by a tiny glimpse of Diablo's true nature. "And now, let us begin the true examination," Diablo said softly. The atmosphere in the throne room instantly turned incredibly heavy, the air pressure dropping so drastically it felt as though the ceiling was collapsing. "No! Stop! Stay away from me! Help! Someone please save me! Please, make it stop! This is absolute hell!" The hunters collapsed to the floor simultaneously, clawing at their throats as they screamed in pure, unadulterated terror. The psychological pressure spread instantly, every single soldier and noble in the room, completely separate from the journalists protected inside Diablo's barrier, began shrieking in agony, rolling frantically across the stone floor. Within seconds, the overwhelming dread caused their minds to short-circuit, leaving them entirely unconscious. Diablo had merely released a microscopic fraction of his aura, an ability known as Lord's Ambition, yet the results were absolute. Only 3 individuals remained on their feet, the leader of the demon hunters and the 2 holy knights, though they were shaking violently just to maintain consciousness. Diablo looked at them, mildly amused. "Oh? So only 3 of you possess the fortitude to pass the examination. Truly, you deserve a modicum of praise for withstanding a fraction of my Lord's ambition. I shall grant you the privilege of challenging me." The hunter leader gritted his teeth, pouring every ounce of his remaining willpower into staying upright. Your bluffs don't frighten me." "Bluffs?" Diablo asked, tilting his head in genuine confusion. "Yes. Everyone knows that only legendary, Demon Lord class entities are capable of wielding Lord's ambition. There is absolutely no way a standard archdemon like you could ever manifest that power," the leader shouted desperately. "Ah, I see where your confusion stems from," Diablo explained elegantly, resting a hand on his hip. "Your assumption is simultaneously correct and incorrect. It is a historical fact that demons like myself face a strict limitation on our magicule capacity when manifesting in the material realm. However, it is entirely possible to evolve to the absolute next stage of existence, provided the correct evolutionary catalyst is secured. The leader swallowed hard, a cold sweat breaking out.
What are you talking about?
I believe the entity known as the Red would serve as an example famous enough for even your limited understanding, Diablo said smoothly. The Red, you don't mean? The leader's voice trailed off as absolute horror took root in his soul. There wasn't a single person in the world who didn't know the legend of the absolute primordial monster who ruled over the demon lords themselves, Guy Crimson. His catastrophic power belonged to ancient myth, leaving absolute devastation in his wake. He was heralded as one of the most powerful existences in the entire universe. Diablo's smile widened, highly pleased by the utter despair washing over the man's face. I am glad we are on the same page. He is the absolute perfect example of the evolutionary path I just described. Once a demon fulfills the mandatory requirements, wielding such power becomes trivial for us. Realizing the terrifying truth of what stood before him, the leader of the hunters burst into tears, his legs giving out as he fell heavily to his knees. Please, please spare my life. I beg of you, I am so sorry, he cried, bowing frantically. Whatever is the matter? Diablo asked, his eyes remaining completely cold. You successfully passed the examination, did you not? You have been granted the rare honor of engaging me in combat. The leader pressed his forehead against the stone floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I beg you for mercy. I was merely executing the orders of the crown. I will do absolutely anything you command. If you want me to slit King Edward's throat right now while he is unconscious, I will do it without hesitation. Just please, spare my life. Behind the safety of the barrier, the journalists watched in absolute disbelief. The legendary leader of the most elite demon slayer regiment in the Western nations was groveling on the ground, weeping like a broken dog. To think that this demon had broken their entire military force without raising a single hand. They felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude that they were not the targets of his wrath. Diablo gave a slight nod. Consider yourself exceptionally fortunate that you are not my primary target today. However, ensure you remember that there will never be a second act of mercy. Thank you so much, the leader gasped, trembling with relief. Now then, move quickly. Relocate all of these unconscious fools inside the barrier alongside the journalists, Diablo commanded. The leader nodded frantically, quickly reviving his closest comrades and desperately dragging the bodies of the fallen soldiers into the protected zone. Once the floor was cleared, Diablo slowly turned his attention toward the two holy knights. Now then, let us address the two of you. Grigory, entirely consumed by his own arrogance as a holy sage, sneered at Diablo's tone. Don't get ahead of yourself, demon. You may have easily terrified those weaklings, but you will quickly find out that a holy sage belongs to an entirely different league. Diablo's smile grew profoundly wide. Fascinating. Consider me thoroughly amused. You have witnessed a microscopic, infinitesimal glimpse of my true power, and yet your arrogance remains entirely unblemished. You humans never cease to amaze me. Of course I am not afraid of you, Grigory boasted, drawing his great sword. I am fully aware that my tactical strength far exceeds yours. With my partner backing me up from the shadows, your total defeat is an absolute certainty. An entertaining joke, Diablo mocked openly. By all means, demonstrate this grand power you are so exceptionally proud of. We will see who is laughing when your head is severed from your shoulders, Grigory spat. I originally desired to be the one to execute that foolish slime you call a master, but unfortunately, Hinata and Sare will be claiming that honor. I suppose your pathetic head will have to suffice for now. Diablo completely froze. The air in the room turned instantly frigid. He could not believe the words that had just exited the human's mouth. This arrogant insect had actually spoken the ultimate taboo phrase in his presence, that foolish slime. In that exact microsecond, Grigory had officially signed his own execution warrant. You were not originally marked for termination today, Diablo whispered, his voice vibrating with an ancient, terrifying rage that shook the very foundation of the castle. But for daring to disrespect the great Lord Rimuru in my presence, your life is officially forfeit. I assure you, your death will be the most agonizingly painful experience imaginable.
We shall see, monster!
Glenda, now! Grigory bellowed. Glenda, who had been completely erasing her presence while sneaking up from behind, rushed Diablo at hypersonic speed. Her mythic dagger was aimed directly at his exposed heart. She closed the distance in a flash, but the exact moment her blade was inches from his coat, she stopped dead in her tracks. It wasn't that she had chosen to halt, her physical body refused to obey her commands. She strained her eyes downward, realizing in horror that she was standing directly in the center of an intricate, glowing geometric array. Diablo slowly turned his head to look at her over his shoulder. Did you honestly believe that because I was conversing with that loudmouth, my guard was lowered? The magic circle beneath your feet is a specialized array designed to instantly paralyze a target while completely sealing all active skills and physical movement. It is a remarkably low-level spell. If an amateur enchantment like this was enough to ensnare you, you require centuries of additional training. Your execution is guaranteed the moment you believed you stood a chance against me. Without a hint of effort, Diablo gripped Glenda securely by the throat. He drove a brutal punch deep into her abdomen, forcing her to cough up a torrent of crimson blood before effortlessly hurling her body across the chamber. Glenda slammed into the far-reinforced wall with a thunderous boom, the sheer kinetic impact cracking the stone infrastructure. She slid limply down the masonry, collapsing onto the floor as a massive pool of blood began to form beneath her broken form. Grigory watched the display, completely speechless. He had been led to believe this mission was a simple extermination of a standard archdemon. He had never imagined in his wildest nightmares that the entity would possess this level of absolute power. Shaking off his panic, he anchored his resolve. He still possessed his absolute trump card. I do not care what sort of pathetic strategy you are calculating over there, Diablo said, turning his gaze entirely onto Grigory. But I assure you, this engagement is already concluded.
What?
Grigory started to speak, but the word died in his throat as a terrifying realization washed over him. Everything around him had suddenly slowed to an absolute crawl. He tried to raise his sword hand, but his limbs felt as heavy as mountains. In reality, his body and his entire perception of the physical world were moving at an unimaginably slow pace. It was a complete distortion of reality. You must be wondering why the world has suddenly ground to a halt, Diablo remarked, walking casually toward him. This is the result of a specialized ability I developed, known as Time Break. It allows me to artificially decelerate the physical time and sensory perception of any chosen target by exactly 1 billion times. At this very microsecond, I am speaking to you normally, but from your current cognitive perspective, it will take roughly a century before my words finish reaching your mind. So, if your perception of time is slowed down to such an extent, imagine what happens when I do this. Diablo calmly stepped forward, extending his bare hand and cleanly piercing through Grigory's heavy armor, burying his fingers directly into the knight's heart. He looked into Grigory's wide, frozen eyes before casually backhanding his body, sending him flying toward the adjacent wall. Right now, I have successfully ruptured your heart. However, from your warped perspective, it will take another 100 years before the electrical signals of pain actually reach your brain. That is your eternal punishment for slandering my master. You will spend centuries watching helplessly as my hand slowly approaches your chest, entirely incapable of altering the outcome. Diablo's smile turned monstrous. You will experience the absolute agony of having your heart crushed in excruciating detail, fully conscious of every minor fiber breaking apart over the course of decades, because the physical event is occurring at a fraction of a second in real time. Since your ears cannot even process my voice right now, and because it will take a century for your physical form to actually expire, I shall deposit your vessel into the underworld to conclude your sentence. With a flick of his wrist, Diablo opened a dimensional rift, transporting Grigory's paralyzed, agonizing body directly into the depths of the underworld. Turning back toward the vacant throne, Diablo's eyes narrowed. The two of you have been observing this theater from the shadows for quite some time now. Don't you think it is time to reveal yourselves? Following his statement, two figures clad in pristine white robes materialized beside the dais. Heavy hoods completely obscured their facial features. They stepped into reality right next to King Edward, who was just beginning to regain consciousness on the floor. What happened? Edward groaned, rubbing his head as he looked around the ruined hall. He paled instantly as he noticed his entire military force locked inside Diablo's barrier, while the demon himself stood entirely unbothered in the center of the room. He trembled with absolute terror, though he took slight comfort in the fact that Diablo's attention was fixed on the new arrivals. Diablo glanced briefly at the spot where he had thrown Glenda, noticing she had managed to use the distraction to crawl away and escape. Frowning slightly at the minor oversight, he returned his gaze to the hooded figures. "And who exactly might the two of you be?" "We are the 7 Days clergy," one of them announced, his voice hollow. "And we have been officially tasked with your total eradication." Without a moment's hesitation, the two figures began channeling an immense, volatile quantity of mana into a synchronized fire spell. "Let us see your demonic defenses survive this. Know the meaning of absolute despair and perish alongside every witness in this city," they bellowed in unison. They unleashed a colossal, catastrophic fireball that expanded instantly, aimed at incinerating every single living soul within the castle perimeter. Diablo, having easily predicted their tactical intent, casually deployed several additional layers of localized barriers, reinforcing the protection around the journalists, the fallen soldiers, and himself. King Edward, driven by sheer survival instinct, had scrambled blindly behind Diablo's position, inadvertently saving his own life by falling within the demon's defensive zone. The massive fire spell detonated instantly, unleashing an apocalyptic explosion that completely leveled the Grand Royal Castle, reducing the structural towers to absolute ash. As the massive cloud of debris settled, Diablo and the protected human stood entirely unharmed. The catastrophic explosion hadn't even scratched the outermost layer of Diablo's barrier. Diablo let out a dark, melodic laugh. "Your objective wasn't to eliminate me at all with that spell. You were aiming entirely for the humans in this room, attempting to permanently silence the media and the royal witnesses." The clergy members flinched, utterly stunned by his absolute defensive capacity, though they quickly masked their panic with unearned bravado. As expected of a high-tier executive belonging to the new demon lord. "Just understand that regardless of your defenses, not a single individual will be leaving this sector alive," one of them countered coldly. Behind the barrier, the journalists and the surviving royal knight stared in absolute shock. The 7 Days clergy, the legendary holy protectors of all mankind, had just actively attempted to murder them in cold blood, while the demon they had been conditioned to hate had intentionally preserved their lives. In a single second, their entire belief system completely shattered. Diablo's smile turned incredibly sharp. "I take it, then, that the two of you are the masterminds behind this entire political theater? You assassinated Archbishop Rahim and manipulated the Western Holy Church into declaring war on my master. Furthermore, you orchestrated the entire civil war within this nation, correct?" "That is entirely correct, demon," one of the clergy snapped arrogantly. "It makes absolutely no difference if you have uncovered our grand design, seeing as your life concludes here today by our hands. Even if your intellect is sharp enough to deduce the truth, what exactly do you possess the power to do about it?" the second clergy mocked. "This is turning into a highly productive afternoon," Diablo remarked, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "I am profoundly grateful that these journalists were present to record your confession for the entire world to see." "You claim that I can do nothing to alter this outcome?" "I shall make the two of you deeply regret those words." Diablo began to unseal his core energy. A dense, crackling black mist materialized around his feet, spreading rapidly across the scorched courtyard. A highly intricate, glowing magic circle manifested alongside his left arm, focusing a compressed, incredibly dense concentration of dark magicules into his palm. A sudden, paralyzing dread gripped the two clergy members. The sheer volume of Diablo's magical presence was exponentially grander than even their deity, Luminous Valentine. The terrifying reality of the situation finally pierced through their arrogance, making them deeply regret engaging this monster in combat. Diablo locked his gaze onto them, his voice dropping to a dangerously calm whisper. Prepare your souls, because I have absolutely no intention of granting either of you mercy. I must update Lord Rimuru immediately regarding the existence of this faction and their underlying plot, Diablo thought to himself. He then raised his hand, gesturing toward the trembling holy figures. Now then, advance whenever you are ready. Left with no avenue for retreat, the 7 days clergy unleashed their remaining reserves, rushing toward Diablo with everything they possessed. They failed to comprehend that by challenging the demon, their lives were already effectively over.